Since Gotham Knights has been announced, there have been a lot of interviews with the creative director, Patrick Redding, where he's talked about a lot of the features in this game. And one thing that has been made very clear time and time again is that this is not an Arkham game. It's not going to play out like an Arkham game structurally. It's very different. And I've had a general idea of what that means, but I guess that I've been a little bit hazy on exactly what a lot of these features will entail and exactly how this thing will play out, how they'll balance the RPG elements with some of the more traditional Arkham mechanics. And this last weekend, I was playing through Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I think it's a major improvement over Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but the point is that I started to recognize a lot of the features that Patrick Redding was discussing in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And if Gotham Knights bears any resemblance to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I think that we can rest pretty easy. I think that there were a lot of concerns up front about these RPG elements because of games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where it becomes a grind fest, where it's simply just not very fun, where it's a lot of filler content and you don't feel very fulfilled playing the game. But Assassin's Creed Valhalla fixed a lot of my nitpicks, and I'm going to do a video discussing in depth my opinions on Assassin's Creed Valhalla exclusively. That's not what this video is about. But ultimately what I'm saying is that it's a game model that I don't think is doomed to fail if the studio knows what they're doing, and with Warner Brothers Games Montreal, I have a lot of faith that they do. Now, the game model that all of us Arkham and Spider-Man fans are used to at this point is that there's a main campaign and then side missions, and then there's some collectibles as well, and that's pretty much it. So, for example, in an open world of an Arkham game, there isn't tons to do in the open world, but you can explore, you can search for Riddler trophies, and then there are some side missions that aren't really connected to the main story, but pop up here and there, maybe with other villains, and they're kind of just these standalone, really short stories that you can play through that aren't super consequential to the main story, but they are kind of just additional things that you can do in the open world. And they kind of just give you things to do after the base game has been completed. And then you also have that main campaign, which is always heavily scripted. It's 100% linear. It basically tells you, okay, go to this location, do this task, fight this person. Great, go to the other side of the map, do this task, do this, watch this cutscene. And usually I'm 100% on board with this style of storytelling in games. I'm completely okay with these being linear, because what it allows the storytellers to do is take complete control of the pacing of the game, and also just of when the plot twists occur, when the character progression happens, and it gives them a lot of control over how the player experiences the game. The Assassin's Creed Valhalla model is very different. And as I mentioned, this seems to be the road that Gotham Knights is going down. But basically, the way that this model works is that the main campaign is viewed as very differently. And what you'll notice is that it does not have the same linear structure that the Arkham games have, where it tells you to go somewhere, watch this cutscene, go somewhere else, do this task, watch this cutscene, go to this other location, fight this boss fight, and then watch this cutscene. Instead, it's going to basically hand you the driver's seat. And the progression of the story will be a lot more in your hands. And the way that this is accomplished is that you sort of get to determine the order in which you do things. And the way that Patrick Redding has described this game is you go and you do a lot of investigation work, and you learn about these villains, you learn what their plan is, and then you go and confront them, and you have these quests with each of these villains. So, for example, we got to see the Mr. Freeze quest that was the game demo for Gotham Knights. And he's mentioned that this is going to be something that we see with a lot of villains in the game. And so rather than telling us, okay, now you have to go visit Mr. Freeze, okay, now you have to go confront Poison Ivy, okay, now you have to go hallucinate whatever mind game Scarecrow wants to play with you, instead it's going to kind of leave that order up to you. And I guess that a good example that I can think of is, imagine if in Arkham Origins, when the 8 assassins are shown to Batman, imagine if the game then told you to go take them out in the order that you felt like doing it. So obviously this heavily changes the structure of the games as we know them, but I think that there's a lot of potential here, especially as I've heard Patrick Redding discuss the ways that you can apply gear to your character, craft them to sort of upgrade them in the directions that you want to. And I just think that it gives the player a lot of agency that doesn't exist in that more traditional Arkham game model, and there's strengths and weaknesses to both. So for example, I don't know that you can tell a story as intricate as Arkham City on a character level, when you can play as 4 different characters at any given time, and it's a less linear story. But on the other hand, in Arkham City, you don't feel like you really have a lot of agency. It's more that the game is telling you what to do. So there's pros and cons to each side of it. And that's not to say that Gotham Knights will not have a good story. I think that there will be plenty of really good character moments. And I think that they're going to do a good job of showing these heroes out of the costume, even in the Belfry. And I think that there's going to be a lot of conversations about their dead mentor. And I think that there's probably going to be some pretty cool plot twists, but they just won't be tied to a linear story. It will be about the progression that you're making. And as you progress through these side missions and through these different narratives and these different arcs for these different villains in the game, you'll start to unfold the mystery yourself. And then that's when you'll start getting these cutscenes that feel more like a main campaign. Another thing that I'd probably guess from what we've heard about this game is that the 5 boroughs of Gotham that they've revealed will be in the open world will play significance into the structure of this game's progression. And I think that the way that that's going to work is that there will probably be a faction or a supervillain controlling each of the 5 boroughs, and then they'll have a bunch of henchmen and then other supervillains working underneath them. And I think that a lot of the game will be you probably taking down some of these lower level villains, henchmen, thugs, and building your way up toward whatever supervillain or group is controlling each borough and taking them out. And I think that that would be an interesting way to differentiate each area of the map, and then also allow the player to feel like they are purifying Gotham, I guess, and sort of doing it again in the order that they want to do it. And I just think that it's such an interesting direction for the Batman-esque games to take. Obviously, this isn't a Batman game, but it basically is. It's just that the Bat family is acting in as a stand-in for Bruce Wayne himself. And I think that it's definitely a departure from the Arkham games, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think that it's going to give a lot of agency to the player. And obviously there might be some sacrifices in the narrative, but ultimately I'm really excited to see what they can do here. Now, as I mentioned, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has actually really sold me on the idea that this type of game model can work, whereas a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey did not do much to encourage my idea of action RPGs. But I think that the team behind Gotham Knights know what they're doing. Patrick Redding has already stated that there's not going to be level gating. So in other words, it's not going to be like, oh, you can't go to Borough 5 of Gotham because the level's too high, and that is really encouraging. He stated that it's not really a grindy game, and ultimately it comes down to what the final product will be. We'll have to wait to see what the game actually is, but I'm just very encouraged by what I've been hearing. It sounds like they are basically taking the fun elements of RPG games and then stripping away the more frustrating elements of RPGs. It sounds like it's going to have a lot more content than the Arkham games. And so this is something that we'll probably be able to play for a long time, probably months after its release. We'll still be able to go back and just have different ways to play through the game, whether it be because you want to play through it as a different character, or because there's additional content that you haven't gotten to. I just think that it's a really big departure for sure. But I also think that there's a lot of potential in what they're doing. But anyways, thanks you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.